Welcome, my friend, to the warmth of Baker Street Ember. Settle in by the fire.
As we prepare for tonight's tale, I must ask, from which shadowy corner of the world are you listening? If you find comfort here, please subscribe and leave a like to support the channel. Now.
The fog that November evening lay thick upon London, muffling the great city in its gray embrace. At 221B Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes sat in his armchair, pipe in hand, contemplating the criminal underworld. Then came the knock. Urgent, desperate, the visitor brought news of a disappearance at the West India docks. Mr. Victor Langford, the renowned importer of Eastern gems, had vanished from his locked office under mysterious circumstances. Scotland Yard called it a simple case of embezzlement in flight with a consignment of uncut diamonds. But the single drop of blood on the carpet, the scent of river mud mingled with Turkish tobacco ash, and the faint impression of a sailor's knot in a discarded piece of twine told Holmes a different tale entirely. The game, as he remarked to me with a gleam in his eye, was afoot, and before the fog lifted, the truth would be revealed. Chapter 1. The Urgent Visitor. I returned to Baker Street that November evening of 1889, weary from a long day at St. Bartholomew's, the chill night air still clinging to my overcoat like a damp shroud. The sitting room glowed with the warmth of the coal fire, its flames snapping in the grate and casting long, dancing shadows across the Persian carpet and cluttered shelves. Sherlock Holmes lounged in his dressing gown, legs stretched before him, steepling his long fingers beneath his chin, while thin wreaths of strong shag tobacco curled lazily from his pipe. Frost patterned the window panes in delicate ferns, contrasting with the comforting heat that radiated from the hearth. I poured hot tea from Mrs. Hudson's tray, its bitter taste sharp on my tongue after the cold streets. Holmes noted my arrival with the slightest tilt of his head, though his gray eyes remained fixed on some invisible problem. The knock came at 9:30. 3 sharp, anxious raps. Mrs. Hudson's light steps preceded the heavier tread of our visitor. She showed in a tall, spare man of about 45, upright in bearing as if shaped by military years. His overcoat hung heavy and sodden with fog, the rough wool reeking of horse manure from the streets, and the damp, sooty smell of coal smoke. His boots left faint prints of reddish clay mixed with black coal dust on the rug. He removed his hat, revealing graying hair, and spoke in a low, controlled voice edged with strain. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I am Reginald Langford, brother to Victor Langford, the gem importer. I come in strictest confidence. My brother has vanished from his office at the West India docks, and Scotland Yard insists he fled with a fortune in uncut diamonds." Holmes rose swiftly, energy animating his lean frame. "Sit, Mr. Langford. The facts, precise, chronological, nothing omitted." Langford took the leather chair, its seat creaking under him. He clasped gloved hands tightly. "Victor, aged 52, went alone yesterday evening, the 12th, to his private office in Warehouse 14. A new consignment of uncut diamonds from Kimberley had arrived, bound for Amsterdam. He always examined such valuables personally. In solitude, door locked, he swallowed. His clerk Perkins waited outside. He heard ordinary sounds, rustling papers, chairs scraping, match struck for one of Victor's Turkish cigars. Then silence. An hour later Perkins knocked, got no reply, and called the night watchman. They forced the door. The office was empty. Overcoat on the peg, hat and stick beside it. Cigars still warm in the tray. Safe open. Diamonds gone. But no one saw him leave. One guarded entrance only. Window high, narrow, fastened inside. Lestrade examined it and declared embezzlement. He took the stones and slipped away in the fog, he said. Langford shook his head. Victor was honorable. He would never disgrace us. Holmes listened in silence, pipe sending meditative blue smoke. He leaned forward. The cigar, exact blend, Turkish, special Constantinople import, strong, aromatic, oily ash. And the carpet stain you mentioned? Small, dark spot near the desk. Perkins said ink. I fear blood. Holmes sprang up and paced rapidly, dressing gown brushing chairs with soft rasps. You were wise to come. The facts contradict Lestrade at every turn. The game is afoot. Watson. He faced Langford. Meet us tomorrow at 9 at the warehouse. Speak to no one meantime. Langford rose gratefully. I shall obey. Thank you. He left. The door clicked shut. Foghorns moaned distantly through the windows. Holmes sank back, relighting his pipe, the match flare briefly lighting his sharp features. The room smelled of tobacco, warm wool, polished leather, and faint coal dust carried on Langford's coat. Observe. Watson. His boots show reddish limehouse clay and dockyard coal dust. Left heel more worn. Slight limp. Stick ferrule mark on carpet there. I saw the faint circle. From mud alone? Not alone. Right shoulder damper. Wind off river while waiting for cab on open key. Gloves dry. He removed them to write the note in his pocket. Paper rustles when he moves. I marveled silently. The fire crackled. Sparks rising. Strong tobacco and hot tea lingered on my tongue. Damp cloth and horse manure scents clung faintly. Holmes consulted his tobacco ash index swiftly. Turkish blend. Distinctive. My monograph notes its oily sheen. Another smoker's ash will differ. He stood at the window. Fog pressing like a living thing. Cold radiated from glass. Fire warmed his back. More awaits. Watson. Arterial blood drop. Sailor's bowline knot entwined. River mud on carpet. Locked door. Untouched coat. Lestrade sees flight. I see violence. Concealment. Crime disguised. His eyes glittered. Truth hides in material facts. Ash, not blood. Examine them. And impossible becomes inevitable. The clock chimed 10. Deep and resonant. Holmes drew his gown closer. Wool rasping leather. Docks at dawn. Fog thick. Thames mud scent strong. Cobbles slick. Prepare yourself. Watson. No ordinary case. I nodded. Thrilled. And the knees mixing as always. Foghorns mourned again. Fire burned steady against November cold. Holmes stared into embers. Mind already on fog-bound keys. Chapter 2. Shadows on the quay. The following morning broke cold and sullen. The November fog so dense that the gas lamps along Baker Street still burned feebly at 8 o'clock. Their yellow halos swallowed almost at once by the gray murk. Holmes and I took a hansom cab to the West India docks. The wheels clattered wetly over the cobbles. Horse hooves slipping now and then on the slick stones. The air tasted of salt and coal smoke, sharp and metallic, while the rough wool of my greatcoat chipped against my neck in the chill draft that came through the apron. We alighted at the dock gates. The smell of Thames mud, tarred rope, and wet timber struck us immediately, thick and almost overpowering. Hansom cabs and heavy drays moved like ghosts through the mist. Men's voices called in coarse Cockney and foreign tongues, muffled by the vapor. The cold bit deep into my bones. Frost still clung to iron railings and the rims of barrels stacked along the quay. Reginald Langford waited beside the warehouse door, face drawn and pale beneath the flickering gaslight. Without many words, he led us up the narrow iron staircase. Each step rang hollow under our boots, the metal cold even through leather soles. The office door stood ajar, lock splintered from the previous night's forcible entry. Inside, the air hung heavy and stale, old tobacco smoke, a faint whiff of carbolic soap from the clerk's recent cleaning, and that unmistakable reek of river mud tracked across the floor. Holmes moved at once to the turkey carpet and dropped to one knee with the swift grace of a man who had done this 1,000 times. He produced his magnifying lens. The glass felt cool against his long fingers as he held it close to the small dark stain near the desk. Arterial blood, Watson, he observed, voice low and precise. See the tiny spray pattern. Faint radiating lines. The blow came from behind, sudden and forceful. A man does not bleed thus while calmly packing diamonds into his pocket and fleeing. I knelt beside him, the pile of the carpet soft and slightly damp under my palm. The metallic scent of dried blood mingled with the tobacco that still lingered in the room. Holmes shifted to the ashtray on the desk. The cigar, he continued. Turkish, as your brother stated, Mr. Langford, but observe the ash, dark, granular, with that peculiar oily black sheen. My monograph on cigar ashes identifies this precisely as Latakia, not the milder Constantinople blend your brother preferred. Someone else smoked here after he was struck. Langford drew in a sharp breath, the sound audible in the quiet room. Then the murderer remained to stage the scene. Exactly. Holmes straightened and crossed to the window. The sill was worn smooth by years of elbows. He ran his fingertips along it, then lifted them to his nose. Fresh river mud. Someone with wet boots stood here. Recently enough for the scent to persist. He pointed downward. A short length of coarse hemp twine lay discarded in the corner near the wall, knotted in an unmistakable fashion. A bowline on a bite, Holmes declared. A sailor's knot, used to secure heavy loads or create a loop for lowering weights. Not the sort of knot a clerk or gentleman ties by accident. The window itself was high and narrow, fastened from the inside with an iron catch. Holmes tested it. The mechanism moved smoothly, oiled and silent. He leaned out briefly into the fog, the cold, damp air rushing in past his face. Lowered, he murmured. The body, unconscious or dead, was lowered by rope to a waiting boat below. The window refastened from outside by a second man, or by some simple mechanical trick. Then the door locked from within by the first man before he descended the same way. I stared at the drop to the quay some 20 feet below. A considerable risk, yet calculated, Holmes replied. The diamonds provide the apparent motive, flight and theft. The coat, hat, and stick left behind suggest he intended to return. Lestrade sees embezzlement. We see murder disguised as disappearance. We descended to question the witnesses. First the clerk Perkins, a thin young man with ink-stained fingers and the faint smell of cheap shag tobacco about him. I heard nothing strange, sir, he said nervously. Only the usual. Casks rolling along the stones, fog horns low on the river, gulls screaming overhead. Then silence. When I knocked, no answer. The night watchman came next, a burly cockney with a pronounced limp and the reek of beer and wet oilskins. Begging your pardon, gents, he rumbled. But no soul passed my gate after 8 o'clock. Gates watched tight. If the gent left, he flew over the water like one o' them gulls. Holmes gave a thin smile. Not flown, my good man. Lowered. And the rope used is of the same coarse make as that coil hanging in your foreman's shed yonder. We moved on to 3 more brief stops. The customs shed where the diamonds had been logged. A clerk showed us the entry, neat, in Victor's own hand. The quay where the Amsterdam-bound steamer still lay at anchor, fog horns sounding mournfully across the gray water. And the foreman's hut, where Holmes pocketed a small fiber sample from the identical rope coil. By noon the fog had lifted slightly, allowing a pale, cold sun to penetrate. Holmes paced the wet stones of the quay, coat flapping, the smooth bowl of his pipe now cool in his hand. The piece is fit, Watson, he said rapidly. A sailor, or one accustomed to ships and knots. A blow from behind, the body lowered to a skiff, the diamonds taken to suggest flight. Yet why leave the coat untouched? Why allow the cigar to burn? Why the single betraying drop of blood? I could offer no answer. The bitter aftertaste of dockside coffee lingered on my tongue. The rough wool of my scarf chafed in the damp wind. Holmes stopped, eyes fixed on the slow-moving river. The murderer is clever, but not perfect. The knot condemns him. The ash identifies him. The mud tracks him. He is close, very close, and already the net begins to draw tight. The fog horns groaned again, low and mournful, as a barge passed slowly in the distance. Chapter 3. The locked room examined. We returned to Warehouse 14 shortly after noon, the pale winter sun now struggling feebly through thinning fog. The quay lay quiet except for the occasional creak of moored shipping and the distant clang of a hammer on iron. Holmes insisted we re-enter the office alone. Langford had been sent to wait below with instructions to admit no one. The iron staircase rang again under our boots, colder now that the morning damp had settled deeper into the metal. Inside, Holmes closed the door behind us, though the splintered lock rendered the gesture symbolic, and stood motionless for several moments, eyes half closed, nostrils slightly flared. The room still carried its mingled odors. Stale Turkish tobacco, the faint metallic bite of dried blood, river mud drying on the carpet, old polished mahogany, and the underlying mustiness of damp timber that never quite dries in dockside buildings. The air felt chill. No fire had been lit here in days. He began methodically at the door. Observe first the lock itself, he said, producing his lens. The wood around the keyhole shows no fresh gouges from a jimmy. only the clean splintering from the watchman's crowbar last night. Yet the door was locked when they arrived. No key was found in the room. Therefore, the murderer either possessed a duplicate or employed a method of locking from outside after departure. He moved to the window next, running gloved fingers along the catch. The iron felt icy, smooth, recently oiled. Note the faint smear of grease, not Victor's habit. His hands were always immaculate. Someone prepared this exit in advance. Holmes knelt again beside the bloodstain. The carpet pile felt coarse under my fingertips as I crouched beside him. The droplet is perfectly round. No smearing. It fell vertically from a height of perhaps 4 feet, consistent with a man struck standing. Blood jetting from a scalp wound. Arterial, as I said, yet only 1 drop. The blow rendered him instantly unconscious. He did not struggle or stagger about bleeding further. He rose and crossed to the desk. Papers lay scattered. Bills of lading. A half-finished letter to the Amsterdam buyer. Holmes lifted the cigar stub with forceps. Still warm when found. Yet ash fallen shows it was lit at least 40 minutes before Perkins knocked. The Latakia ash is unmistakable. My monograph records its peculiar granular texture under magnification. Victor smoked only the Constantinople mild blend. The intruder smoked after the crime, deliberately, perhaps to calm nerves or to suggest Victor lingered voluntarily. Next, he examined the safe. The heavy doors stood ajar. Inside, velvet trays lay empty save for dust. No sign of hurried scooping, Holmes observed. The trays were lifted out carefully. Note the faint parallel marks where fingers gripped the edges. Steady hands, not a panicked thief. He turned his attention to the twine, holding the short length to the light from the window. He traced the knot with a fingertip, bowling on a bite, executed with precision. Note how the standing part lies flat and untwisted. This is no landsman's imitation. A seaman tied this. And recently, the hemp still carries the faint scent of Stockholm tar. Holmes moved swiftly about the room, gathering further traces. A single dark haircut on the window sill catch, short course. A smear of river mud on the inner sill, shaped like the toe cap of a heavy boot. A faint scuff on the desk leg where something heavy had rested momentarily. Each discovery he noted in a small leather-bound book. Pencil scratching rapidly. At length he stood in the center of the room, steepling his fingers, eyes distant. The sequence is now tolerably clear. Watson, the murderer, or an accomplice, concealed himself in the office earlier, perhaps in the large cupboard behind the door or beneath the desk. Victor entered, locked the door as usual, lit his cigar, opened the safe. The intruder struck from behind with a life preserver or sandbag, scalp wound. No fracture likely, hence only 1 drop of blood. Victor fell senseless. The murderer then removed the diamonds, tied the bowline, passed the rope through the window catch for purchase, lowered the body to a waiting skiff below. He refastened the catch, possibly with a thin cord or hook dropped from outside, then descended himself by the same rope, untied it, and departed in the boat. The door remained locked. No key needed. I stared at him. But how did the second man leave without being seen by the watchman? There was no second man visible on the quay. The skiff waited under the overhang of the warehouse, hidden from the gate. 1 man sufficed, or 2 worked in perfect concert. Holmes paced slowly, the carpet muffling his steps. This is no haphazard crime, Watson. It shows foreknowledge of Victor's habits, of the office layout, of the tides. For the skiff could only approach at high water last night. It shows coolness under pressure, remaining to smoke, to arrange the scene just so. And it shows contempt for Scotland Yard's powers of observation. He stopped at the window and gazed down at the great Thames, where a string of barges moved slowly against the tide. The fog horn sounded again, low and mournful. In every great crime, he mused aloud, there runs a thread of arrogance. The criminal believes himself invisible, his method untraceable, yet it is precisely that belief which betrays him. I recall the case of the engineer's thumb, where the hiding place beneath the floor was revealed by a single blood stain on the boards, or the affair of the speckled band, where the ventilator and bell rope seemed innocent until examined in the light of material facts. Here, too, the material betrays. The wrong ash, the sailor's knot, the single drop of blood whose trajectory defies the theory of flight. When we eliminate the impossible, embezzlement, and voluntary disappearance. What remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Calculated murder, staged to appear self-inflicted. He turned to me, eyes bright. Crime is the product of human ingenuity turned against society. Yet detection is the application of trained observation and logic to reverse the ingenuity. The criminal leaves his signature in the smallest details. Our task is to read it before the fog of time obscures the print. The room had grown colder. My breath showed faintly. Holmes drew his coat closer, the rough wool rasping. Tonight we watch the tides, he declared, and tomorrow we begin to trace the rope, the tar, the hair. The quarry is near. Watson. He feels the first tremor of pursuit. Chapter 4. Trails in the fog. The afternoon wore on with deceptive calm. Holmes and I left the warehouse and plunged back into the labyrinth of Limehouse streets. The fog now lifting enough to reveal the soot-blackened brick of warehouses and the gleam of wet cobbles under gas lamps that had not yet been lit. The air tasted of salt, coal dust, and the faint bitterness of low tide. Horse manure lay thick wherever drays had passed, its sharp odor mingling with the ever-present smell of Thames mud. Our first call was the rope maker's yard near the West India Dock Road. A grizzled foreman with hands like knotted oak examined the fiber Holmes had taken from the foreman's shed. The coarse hemp felt rough against my fingers as I passed it over. Stockholm tar, sir? The man grunted, sniffing. We don't use it here. Too dear for common cordage. Comes from the naval stores down by Millwall. Or sometimes the chandlers would supply the colliers. Sold a length like this 3 days ago to a tall chap with a sailor's roll to his walk. Pay cash. No questions. Holmes pocketed the sample. Description? Broad shoulders. Dark cap pulled low. Scar across the left thumb. Old cut. White against the skin. Spoke little, but his voice carried a touch of the Mersey. We moved on swiftly. At the Millwall Naval Chandlery, the proprietor recognized the knot at once. Bowling on a bite. Seaman's work. Sure enough, that tarred hemp sold 2 fathoms to a man answering the same description yesterday morning. Said it was for a private barge. Left in a hurry when I asked for his name. The cold wind off the river cut through my coat. I felt the chill settle in my bones. Holmes' eyes glittered with the hunter's light. Next, the hair, he said. We took a 4-wheeler to a small laboratory kept by an analytical chemist in Poplar whom Holmes occasionally consulted. The room smelled of carbolic, ether, and hot metal from the Bunsen burners. Under the microscope, the single dark hair from the window still revealed itself as coarse, slightly wavy, with a faint reddish tinge at the root. Mixed race, perhaps, the chemist murmured, or a man who has spent much time in the sun. Not pure Anglo-Saxon. Holmes nodded. And the mud on the sill? A chemical test followed, quick and precise. The reddish clay matched exactly the sample Reginald Langford had carried on his boots. Limehouse Gasworks District. Yet the coal dust overlay was fresher. Dockyard fresh. 2 trails converge. Holmes observed as we stepped back into the street. The sailor and someone nearer home. Danger first showed itself near dusk. We had returned to the docks to observe the tide. High water would return near 9. The same hour Victor had vanished. Holmes stationed us in the shadow of a stack of barrels near Warehouse 14. The rough wood damp against my back. The fog horns moaned low across the water. Footsteps echoed irregularly on the quay. A figure approached, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the unmistakable roll of a seaman. He paused at the warehouse door, glanced about, then slipped inside. Holmes touched my arm. We followed silently. Inside, the man lit a dark lantern, its beam cutting through the gloom. He went straight to the window, produced a short length of the same tarred rope, and began testing the catch. Holmes stepped forward. You have business here, my man? The sailor spun, lantern raised. In the yellow light, we saw the scar across his left thumb, livid white. His face was weather-beaten, eyes narrow with sudden alarm. Private matter, he growled, voice thick with Liverpool accent. Clear off. Holmes advanced calmly. The rope you carry matches that used to lower Mr. Victor Langford to his death. The knot is yours. The ash in the tray is yours. You will come with us to Scotland Yard. The man lunged. His fist caught Holmes on the shoulder. Holmes staggered, but recovered with the speed of a boxer. I drew my revolver, but the sailor was already at the window, rope in hand. He flung himself out, the hem rasping against the sill. We heard the splash as he struck the water below. Holmes leaned out, gone into the fog, but he cannot go far. We descended rapidly. On the quay, a small skiff rocked at the steps. Painter freshly cut. Footprints in the mud led toward the mill wall cut. Holmes knelt, lens in hand. Same boot broad, hobnailed, and here, blood on the gunwale, fresh. He cut himself in his haste. The chase led us through narrow alleys behind the warehouses. Gas lamps flickered weakly. The cold night air carried the scent of coal fires from tenement chimneys and the sour reek of the river. We heard running footsteps ahead. Then silence. At the mouth of a dark court, Holmes stopped. False trail, he whispered. He doubled back. We retraced our steps. Near the chandlery, a door stood ajar. Inside, by the dim glow of a single candle, stood a second man, slender, well-dressed, face half hidden by shadow. He held a small valise. Beside him on the counter lay a velvet pouch that glinted with uncut diamonds. Reginald Langford turned, face ashen. M.R. Holmes, he said, voice shaking. You are mistaken. Holmes regarded him steadily. No, Mr. Langford. The mud on your boots came from this very district. Not merely the gasworks, but the path behind this shop. You hired the sailor. You struck your brother. You took the diamonds. The lock room was your device. Clever, but betrayed by the sailor's knot. The wrong ash. The single drop of blood that fell before you could wipe it away. Langford's hand moved toward his pocket. Holmes was faster. His stick flicked out, knocking the revolver from the man's grasp. It clattered to the floor. You will not escape, Holmes said quietly. The game ends here. Outside. The foghorn sounded once more, deep and final. The cold pressed in, but the thrill of the hunt burned bright in Holmes' eyes. The false trails had led us to the heart of the deception, and the net, at last, had closed. Chapter 5. Pursuit on the tide. The fog had thickened again with the turn of the tide, rolling in from the estuary like a gray tide of its own. Gas lamps along the mill wall cut flickered feebly, their light diffusing into soft halos that barely pierced the murk. The air tasted of salt and coal smoke. The cold dampness seeped through my coat, chilling the skin beneath. Holmes moved swiftly ahead of me, coat flapping, the smooth bowl of his pipe now clenched between his teeth, though unlit. We had lost Langford's trail for only minutes after the confrontation in the chandlery. The man had slipped out the back door while we secured the diamonds and summoned a constable from the nearest beat. Holmes had wasted no time. He will make for the water, Holmes said, voice low and urgent. A man who planned an escape by skiff will have a second boat waiting. The tide is on the flood, perfect for slipping downriver unseen. We hurried along the narrow path beside the cut, boots squelching in mud that smelled strongly of river silt and decaying weed. The sounds of the docks carried distorted through the fog. Distant winches creaking, a foghorn bellowing low and mournful. The slap of water against stone steps. Somewhere ahead a chain rattled, then stopped abruptly. Holmes halted, raising a hand. Listen, a soft splash. Oars dipping carefully, then the faint creak of relics. The sound came from the direction of a small landing stage used by lightermen. We advanced more cautiously. The landing emerged from the mist. Wet wooden planks. A single iron ring bolted to a post. A small skiff rocked gently at the steps. Painter loose. 2 figures occupied it. One rowing with short, powerful strokes. The other huddled in the stern, clutching the velvet pouch of diamonds. Even in the dimness, I recognized Reginald Langford's upright posture, now hunched with desperation. The rower was the scarred sailor we had encountered earlier at the warehouse. His broad shoulders worked the oars with practiced ease. The boat was already pulling away into the main channel. Holmes sprang forward. Stop, in the name of the law. The sailor glanced back, face pale in the fog light, then redoubled his efforts. The skiff surged forward, cutting a dark V through the black water. I drew my revolver. Shall I fire? Not yet, Holmes snapped. We need him alive, and the diamonds intact. We raced along the bank, following the curve of the cut toward where it joined the main dock basin. The path grew treacherous, slippery with algae, littered with coiled ropes and broken crates. My boots slid once. I caught myself on a rough piling, splinters pricking my palm through my glove. Ahead, The skiff veered toward a cluster of moored barges. The sailor shipped oars and poled the boat between two of the broad, tarry hulls, seeking cover. Holmes skidded to a halt at the edge of the quay. "They mean to hide among the lighters until the fog thickens further," he said, then slipped past the river police launch at the entrance. He scanned the water, eyes narrowed. There, another boat, untended. A small dinghy lay tied to a neighboring post. Oars inside. Holmes untied the painter with swift fingers, the coarse rope rasping against the wood. We pushed off. I took one oar, Holmes the other. The cold water lapped against the thin planks, chilling my ankles where it seeped through. We rowed hard, the skiff's wake still visible in the smooth patch ahead. The fog played tricks. Sounds bounced. Shapes loomed, then vanished. A sudden shout rang out. The sailor had seen us. He thrust the oars back into the water, pulling frantically toward the far side of the basin. Holmes rowed with mechanical precision, each stroke driving us forward. My arms burned. Sweat mixed with the damp on my face despite the cold night air. The chase narrowed. We closed to within 30 yards. Langford turned in the stern, face contorted. He stood unsteadily, drew a revolver, and fired once. The report cracked across the water. The bullet struck the water near our bow, sending up a small fountain. "Down!" I cried, pulling Holmes lower. Another shot, wilder this time, passed overhead with a vicious whine. Holmes did not flinch. He is desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. We gained another 10 yards. The sailor glanced back, saw our closing distance, and abruptly changed course, heading straight for a narrow gap between two anchored colliers. The passage looked impossibly tight. "He means to lose us in the maze," Holmes said, "but he forgets the tide." The flood was running strongly now. Water swirled around the great hulls, creating treacherous eddies. The skiff shot into the gap, and immediately yawed as the current caught it broadside. The sailor fought the oars, but too late. The boat grated against the side of a collier with a splintering crunch, then spun. Langford lost his footing. He clutched at the gunwale. The pouch of diamonds slipped from his grasp and fell into the black water with a soft flop. "No!" Langford's cry was raw, despairing. The sailor tried to steady the boat, but the current pinned them against the hull. Holmes maneuvered our dinghy alongside with a final powerful stroke. I shipped my oar and leapt across, landing heavily in the skiff. The sailor swung at me with an oar. I ducked, caught his wrist, and twisted. He grunted in pain. Holmes followed, light-footed despite the rocking deck. He leveled his stick at Langford, who stood frozen, staring at the spot where the diamonds had vanished. "Enough," Holmes said quietly. "The game is up." Langford's shoulders sagged. The revolver slipped from his fingers and clattered to the bottom boards. The sailor, nursing his wrist, made no further resistance. I secured their hands with a length of rope from the skiff. The cold bit deeper now. My breath steamed in the fog. Somewhere upstream a police launch hooted, drawn by the shots. Holmes knelt at the gunwale, peering into the water, lost for the moment. But the river gives up her secrets in time. The pouch will be found, perhaps tomorrow, when the tide ebbs. He rose, eyes meeting mine. "A breakthrough, Watson. We have the men. We have the confession in their flight. And though the stones are temporarily lost, their absence seals the case more surely than their recovery." The foghorn sounded again, closer now, as the police launch approached through the mist. Holmes straightened his coat, the rough wool rasping softly. "The game is afoot no longer," he said. "It is concluded." Chapter 6. Threads of motive. The police launch carried us back to the West India dock steps under a sky now clearing to reveal a few cold stars. The night air tasted sharply of salt and river mud. The rough wool blankets the constables provided chafed against my neck as I sat beside Holmes in the stern. Reginald Langford and the scarred sailor sat handcuffed forward, silent save for the occasional creak of the boat and the low, rhythmic thud of the engine. Foghorns still moaned distantly, though their sound no longer carried the same menace. At Scotland Yard, we delivered our prisoners to Lestrade, who received them with his usual mixture of grudging respect and irritation. The inspector's office smelled of stale pipe tobacco, ink, and the faint carbolic used to scrub the cells. A coal fire burned low in the grate. Its warmth barely reached the corners where frost still clung to the window panes. Another of your theatricals, Holmes, Lestrade remarked dryly, eyeing the two men. But I'll grant the evidence looks damning. The diamonds, lost to the Thames. Holmes replied, yet their absence is itself evidence. A man who flees with stones in his pocket does not drop them in panic unless the flight is unplanned. Langford lifted his head. His voice, once controlled, now carried the flat weariness of defeat. I did not intend murder, only removal. Victor was going to expose me. Holmes leaned against the desk, steepling his fingers. Expose you to what? Precisely. Langford exhaled slowly. The room was quiet save for the soft crackle of settling coals and the distant chime of Big Ben marking midnight. 3 years ago, he began, our firm faced ruin. The Australian shipments were delayed by storms. Creditors pressed. Victor refused to speculate. I borrowed from certain parties in Limehouse, men who lent at ruinous interest. When repayment came due, I forged Victor's signature on a bill of exchange for £10,000. The diamonds were to cover it. When Victor discovered the forger last week, he threatened to go to the authorities. Reputation, family name, everything would be lost. Holmes nodded once. And so you planned his disappearance, making it appear he had absconded with the consignment. The sailor? Jonas Crowe, Langford said, glancing at the man beside him. A former hand on our East India packets. He knew the docks, the tides, the knots. I paid him £200 to hide in the office, strike Victor senseless, lower him to the skiff, and row him downriver to a quiet stretch near Greenwich. There he was to be left, alive, bound, in a position to be found later as a victim of robbery. The diamonds would suggest Victor had taken them and fled abroad. Crowe spoke for the first time, voice rough with a Mersey edge. I never meant to kill him. The blow was too hard. He never woke when we reached Greenwich marshes. He was cold. I panicked, left him in the reeds and rode back. Mr. Langford said we make it look like suicide or accident. Holmes turned to the sailor. Yet you returned to the warehouse tonight. Why? Crowe shrugged. To retrieve the rope. Foolish. I know, but it bore my knot and my blood from a cut hand. I feared it would be traced. The method was ingenious, Holmes observed, pacing slowly before the fire. The locked door, the untouched coat, the smoldering cigar, all designed to suggest voluntary flight. Yet every material detail betrays you. The latakia ash of a different smoker, the bowline on a bite foreign to a gentleman's hand, the single arterial drop whose trajectory could only come from a blow delivered while standing, the fresh river mud on the sill inconsistent with a man who left by the guarded door. He stopped. Motive, too, is written in the evidence. The forged bill. Your brother's signature shows a characteristic tremor in the final flourish, absent in the forged document I examined in your office yesterday. The mud on your boots matched the path behind the chandlery where you met Crowe. The diamonds in your valise bore the same Kimberley dust as those logged in the customs entry. Langford bowed his head. I thought myself cleverer than Scotland Yard. I never reckoned on you. Holmes regarded him coolly. Many have made that miscalculation. Later, back at Baker Street, the fire burned brighter. Holmes lounged in his armchair, pipes sending thin blue wreaths toward the ceiling. The room smelled of shag tobacco, warm leather, and the faint trace of river mud still clinging to our boots. Hot tea steamed in my cup. Its bitter taste grounded me after the night's events. Holmes spoke reflectively, almost to himself. Observe how consistently criminals return to familiar techniques, Watson. Langford's forgery echoed a case I handled in '85. The matter of the forged Maltese bonds, where a junior partner imitated his senior's signature with such precision that only the slight difference in ink aging revealed the fraud. Here, too, the material betrayed, the tremor absent, the paper too new for the date claimed. He drew deeply on his pipe. The sailor's nut was another signature. In the affair of the Gloria, Scott, a seaman's habit of tying bowlines betrayed the mutineers. Men revert to what they know under pressure. Crowe's choice of knot was as distinctive as a fingerprint. He leaned forward, eyes bright. Yet the true lesson lies in the arrogance of method. The criminal believes his contrivance perfect. Locked room, staged disappearance, planted clues, but perfection demands flawlessness. And no man is flawless. The single drop of blood, the wrong ash, the misplaced rope. These are not accidents. They are the inevitable signature of human fallibility. Holmes rose and stood at the window, gazing into the night where the last wisps of fog drifted past the gas lamps. The cold pressed against the glass. Inside, the fire snapped comfortably. Crime is ingenuity turned destructive, he mused. Detection is the patient reversal of that ingenuity through observation of the material world. When logic is applied without sentiment, the pattern emerges. The impossible is eliminated. What remains, however improbable, is truth. He turned, a faint smile touching his lips. Langford sought to vanish his brother and preserve his honor. Instead, his own method preserved the evidence that destroyed him. A fitting symmetry. Watson. The clock chimed 1. Holmes resumed his seat, drawing his dressing gown closer against the chill that crept under the door. Tomorrow we shall see the pouch recovered. Tide and current are predictable, and with it, justice will be complete. Outside, a hansom cab rattled past, wheels hissing on wet cobbles. The case, for the moment, rested. Yet the quiet satisfaction in Holmes' eyes told me the threads had at last been drawn tight. Chapter 7. The complete revelation. The following morning dawned crisp and clear. The first frost of the season rhyming the window panes of 221B Baker Street. Inside, the coal fire burned steadily, its warmth driving back the chill that still lingered from the river. The room smelled of fresh coffee, bitter and hot, mingled with Holmes' shag tobacco and the faint, persistent trace of Thames mud on our boots from the night before. Holmes stood at the mantel, steepling his fingers, eyes fixed on the small velvet pouch that now rested there, recovered by river police at dawn as the ebb tide exposed it among the reeds near Greenwich. Lestrade arrived at 10, accompanied by 2 sergeants. His face bore the familiar expression of professional chagrin tempered by reluctant admiration. He removed his bowler, placed it carefully on the side table, and accepted a cup of coffee from Mrs. Hudson. "Well, Mr. Holmes," he began, settling into the leather armchair with a creak. "You've done it again? The diamonds are intact. Every stone accounted for. Langford has made a full statement. Crow corroborates it in every particular. But before we close the file, I should like to hear your complete account. For the record." Holmes inclined his head. "Very well, Inspector. The case is simplicity itself once the material facts are arranged in their proper order." He began to pace slowly before the fire, the carpet muffling his steps, dressing gown rustling softly. Victor Langford vanished from a locked office on the evening of the 12th. Scotland Yard saw embezzlement. Safe open, diamonds gone. No sign of struggle, save one small blood stain dismissed as ink. Yet every physical detail contradicted voluntary flight. He stopped and pointed to an imaginary spot on the floor. First, the blood. A single arterial drop. Round, unsmeared, fallen from height. Consistent only with a sudden blow to the head while the victim stood upright. A fleeing man bleeds on door handles, stairs, thresholds. Not one perfect droplet on his own carpet. Second, the cigar ash. Victor favored mild Constantinople Turkish. The ash in the tray was Latakia. Dark, oily, granular. My monograph confirms it. Someone else smoked after the blow was struck, deliberately lingering to suggest Victor had sat there calmly. Third, the knot in the discarded twine. A bowline on a bike. Seaman's work. Precise and habitual. No gentleman ties thus by chance. The rope itself bore Stockholm tar, sold recently to a man with a scarred left thumb. Fourth, the mud. River mud on the inner window sill. Fresh boot prints matching heavy seaman's footwear. Yet the door remained locked. No key inside. The window catch, recently oiled, showed faint grease smears inconsistent with Victor's fastidious habits. Holmes resumed pacing, voice rapid and precise. The sequence followed inevitably. Jonas Crow, hired by Reginald Langford, concealed himself in the office earlier, likely in the large cupboard. Victor entered alone, locked the door, lit his cigar, opened the safe. Crow struck from behind with a sandbag or life preserver. Scalp wound, arterial spray, instant unconsciousness. Only one drop fell before Victor collapsed. He then removed the diamonds, tied the bowline, rigged the rope through the window catch for purchase, lowered the unconscious man to the waiting skiff below. The catch was refastened from outside, simple enough with a thin cord or hook dropped back through. Crow descended the same way, untied the rope, and rode away. The door stayed locked. The coat, hat, and stick were left to suggest Victor intended to return. Lestrade leaned forward. And the motive? Financial ruin and forgery? Holmes replied. Langford had forged his brother's signature on a bill of exchange for £10,000 to cover debts to Limehouse moneylenders. Victor discovered the forgery days earlier and threatened exposure. Rather than face disgrace, Reginald planned to make Victor disappear, the diamonds providing apparent motive for flight. He intended the body to be found later, bound, robbed, perhaps drowned, while he claimed the stones had been stolen by his brother before vanishing. The error lay in execution, Holmes continued. Crow's blow was too severe. Victor died en route to Greenwich Marshes. Panic followed. Crow abandoned the body in the reeds instead of staging an accident. Later, fearing the rope would be traced, bearing his knot and a trace of his own blood from a cut hand, he returned to the warehouse to retrieve it. That act brought him into our path. He turned to Lestrade. The diamonds were never intended for long concealment. Langford carried them in his valise when we cornered him in the chandlery. In his flight by skiff, he clutched them still, until the boat yawed in the tideway, and they fell overboard. Their recovery this morning merely confirms what his flight already proved. Lestrade rubbed his chin. And you anticipated the recovery? The Thames is predictable, Holmes said. High water at 9 last night. Ebb beginning at 3 this morning. Current and tide tables placed the drop near Greenwich. A dredge and sharp eyes sufficed. He stopped pacing and faced us both. When you have eliminated the impossible, voluntary disappearance, outside abduction through a guarded door, simple theft, what remains is murder disguised as flight. The material traces, the ash, the knot, the blood, the mud, spoke plainly once arranged in logical sequence. Lestrade rose slowly. I shall so note in the report. Langford will face the charge of murder. Crow as accessory. The forged bill strengthens the motive. Justice, at least, will be served. He extended his hand. Holmes shook it briefly. As Lestrade departed, the door closing with a soft thud, Holmes sank into his chair. The fire snapped. Hot coffee steamed on the table. He relit his pipe, the match flaring briefly. Elementary, Watson, he murmured, a rare smile touching his lips. The entire edifice of deception crumbled under the weight of its own inconsistencies. Outside, a hansom cab rattled past on the frosty street. The frost on the windows began to melt in thin rivulets, catching the weak winter sun. Holmes leaned back, eyes half closed in quiet triumph. The case was closed. The truth, at last, laid bare. Chapter 8. Justice takes its course. The days following the arrest passed in a quiet, methodical procession of official procedure. Baker Street resumed its familiar rhythm. The soft rustle of newspaper pages, the crackle of fresh coal in the grate, the occasional scrape of Holmes' violin bow as he played absent snatches of melody while pondering some unrelated problem. Yet the case lingered in small ways. The faint smell of river mud that clung to our boots for days. The bitter aftertaste of strong coffee we drank during late-night discussions. The cold draft that slipped under the door each evening as frost deepened on the window panes. On the morning of the 16th, Inspector Lestrade called again. He arrived punctually at 11, bowler in hand, coat damp from a light sleet that had begun to fall over London. The air outside carried the sharp scent of wet coal smoke and horse manure from the street below. Inside, the sitting room felt warm by contrast, the fire sending a steady heat across the Persian carpet. Morning, gentlemen, Lestrade said, accepting a chair and a cup of hot tea. The porcelain felt warm against his gloved fingers. I thought you'd wish to hear the latest before the matter goes fully to the Crown. Holmes leaned back in his armchair, steepling his fingers. Proceed, Inspector. Lestrade opened a small notebook, its pages rustling softly. Langford has entered a plea of guilty to manslaughter. His counsel persuaded him that a charge of murder would be difficult to defend given the absence of premeditated intent to kill. The blow, he maintains, was meant only to stun. The prosecution accepts this, though the forging of the bill and the elaborate staging of the disappearance will weigh heavily at sentencing. And Crow? I asked. Accessory after the fact, plus conspiracy to defraud. He's cooperating fully. Gave a detailed statement about the hiring, the payment, the route downriver. He'll likely receive a lighter sentence for turning Queen's evidence. Both men are remanded in custody at Newgate pending trial next month. Holmes nodded slowly. And the diamonds? Returned to the firm's trustees yesterday. Every stone matched the customs manifest. The Amsterdam buyer has been informed. The consignment will ship under new guardianship. Reginald Langford's share in the business is forfeit. Creditors will take what remains after the forged bill is honored from his personal estate. Lestrade closed the notebook with a snap. There are loose ends, of course. The moneylenders Langford owed. They've gone quiet since word spread of the arrest. Scotland Yard will watch them. But that's another matter. For this case, the chain is complete. He rose, smoothing his coat. One thing more. The coroner's inquest on Victor Langford's body, found in the Greenwich marshes as Crowe described, returned a verdict of death by misadventure following a criminal assault. The family has claimed the remains. The funeral will be private at the old Langford plot in Highgate Cemetery tomorrow. Holmes inclined his head. Thank you, Inspector. Your thoroughness does credit to the Yard. Lestrade gave a wry smile. Coming from you, that's high praise. Good day, gentlemen. After he left, the room fell quiet save for the ticking of the mantel clock and the soft hiss of coals settling in the grate. Holmes rose and crossed to the window, gazing down into Baker Street where sleet now clung to the railings in thin white lines. The cold pressed against the glass. Inside, the fire's warmth wrapped around us like a familiar cloak. I broke the silence. I sat in for the family. Victor dead. Reginald disgraced. The business crippled. Holmes turned. Yet justice, in its imperfect way, has been served. The guilty are punished according to their deeds. The innocent, such as young Perkins and the night watchman, are cleared of suspicion. Reputation, so fragile in our society, is restored where it may be. He returned to his chair and took up his pipe, the smooth bowl cool against his palm. The aftermath reveals much. Watson, observe how the material evidence continues to speak even after capture. The diamonds recovered intact prove no theft occurred beyond the initial removal. The forged bill, when compared side by side with genuine specimens, shows discrepancies in pressure and ink flow that no clever forger could entirely mask. Langford's boots still bear the mud of the path where he met Crowe. Traces confirmed by chemical analysis. These facts do not vanish with confession. They corroborate it. I nodded. And the public? The newspapers will carry the story tomorrow. Tragic disappearance solved. Brother's desperate scheme exposed. The details will be sanitized, of course. No mention of the sailor's knot or the precise trajectory of the blood drop. But the truth will suffice for those who matter. He drew a long pull on his pipe, sending a thin blue wreath toward the ceiling. The strong tobacco mingled with the scent of burning coal and the faint leather smell of the armchair. Loose ends are tied, he continued. M.R.S. Hudson reports that Reginald Langford's widow has taken rooms in Kensington under her maiden name. She will live quietly, supported by what remains of the family fortune after debts are settled. The clerk Perkins has been promoted to manager pro tem. Honest, if unimaginative, he will keep the firm afloat until a new partner is found. Holmes paused, eyes distant. In time, the name Langford will recover something of its former luster. Reputation is a curious thing, destroyed in a moment, rebuilt slowly through years of rectitude. Victor's memory will be honored. Reginald's crime will fade into footnote. Outside, a hansom cab splashed past through melting sleet, wheels rumbling over wet cobbles. The clock chimed noon. Its deep tone resonated through the room. Holmes set his pipe aside. The machinery of justice grinds slowly, Watson, but it grinds exceedingly small. Today we see its first turnings. Prisoners held, evidence cataloged, verdicts returned. By next month the assizes will pronounce sentence. And after that, silence. The case will join the index, another volume in the record of human frailty and human detection. He leaned back, a faint smile touching his lips. Yet for us, the work is done. The material world has spoken. Reason has interpreted. Justice begins its slow march. The fire snapped once, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. The room felt peaceful. The cold outside held at bay by warmth within. Holmes picked up his Stradivarius, drew the bow across the strings in a slow, contemplative air. I watched the flames dance and reflected that, in the quiet aftermath of great events, Ordinary life reasserted itself, fragile, imperfect, but enduring. Chapter 9. Restoration and Resolution. The trial at the Old Bailey commenced on the 20th of December, 1889. Under a sky so leaden that gas lamps burned at midday along Newgate Street. Inside the court, the air felt close and heavy, smelling of polished oak, old paper, the faint metallic tang of ink from the reporters' benches, and the underlying damp wool of overcoats worn by spectators who had queued for hours in sleep. The cold seeped through stone walls despite the braziers that glowed at intervals. Frost still rimed the narrow windows high above. Reginald Langford stood in the dock, pale but composed, dressed in sober black. Beside him, Jonas Crow appeared diminished, broad shoulders hunched, the scar on his left thumb now a stark white line against rough skin. Both men pleaded guilty as arranged. Langford to manslaughter and conspiracy to defraud. Crow to accessory after the fact and conspiracy. The judge, Mr. Justice Hawkins, presided with the measured gravity the occasion demanded. The prosecution opened briefly. Counsel laid before the jury the forged bill of exchange, its ink too fresh, pressure marks inconsistent with Victor's hand, and the recovered diamonds, each stone glinting under the court's lamps as they were passed in velvet trays. The single drop of blood from the office carpet that was produced in a small glass vial, its trajectory explained by medical testimony from a police surgeon who confirmed arterial spray from a blow delivered while the victim stood. The bola knot in the tarred rope, identified by a master rigger as Seaman's work, was exhibited alongside samples of Stockholm tar sold to Crow days before the crime. Holmes and I sat in the public gallery. He watched impassively, steepling his fingers beneath his chin, while I noted the quiet murmurs that ran through the court when the forged signature was compared side by side with genuine specimens on an easel. The differences, subtle variations in flourish and pen pressure, were plain even to lay eyes. Langford's counsel spoke in mitigation. He painted a picture of a man driven to desperation by ruinous debt, not malice aforethought. The blow was intended only to render the deceased insensible, he declared, voice steady. The death was unintended tragedy. My client's remorse is profound. The judge listened without interruption, then addressed the prisoners. Reginald Langford, he said, tone measured, you have brought lasting dishonor upon an honorable name. Your brother's death, though not premeditated murder, was the direct consequence of your criminal design. For manslaughter and conspiracy, you are sentenced to 15 years penal servitude. Crow received 8 years, the lighter term reflecting his lesser role and full cooperation. As the prisoners were led below, the court emptied slowly. Outside, sleet had turned to soft snow. Flakes drifted past gas lamps, muffling the clatter of hansom cabs. The cold bit sharply. I drew my scarf tighter, feeling the rough wool against my chin. We walked in silence toward the Strand. Holmes broke it first. The sentence is just, he observed. 15 years will see Langford emerge an old man, reputation irretrievable. Yet the family name endures through Victor's memory. The business continues under trustees. Perkins, promoted permanently, has shown unexpected competence. The Amsterdam shipment sailed last week without incident. I nodded. And Mrs. Langford, Victor's widow? She is removed to a small house in Hampstead with her daughter. A modest annuity from the firm sustains them. The scandal has passed. Society, ever fickle, now speaks of her fortitude rather than her husband's disgrace. We turned into Fleet Street. The smell of hot chestnuts from a street vendor mingled with coal smoke and wet newsprint. Boys cried the evening editions. Dockyard mystery solved. Brother sentenced. Holmes purchased one. Scanned the columns rapidly, then folded it away. All mysteries explained, he said quietly. The locked door, the untouched coat, the smoldering cigar, each detail accounted for. The sailor's knot, the wrong ash, the single betraying drop of blood. No longer enigmas, but links in an unbreakable chain. We reached the embankment. The Thames flowed dark and steady beneath snow-dusted bridges. Foghorns sounded low from downriver, though the mist had lifted for the first time in weeks. The cold air carried the clean scent of frost over water. Life returns to its ordinary channels, Holmes continued. Perkins writes me grateful letters. The trustees have offered a retainer should future difficulties arise. Reginald's creditors, once clamorous, have been satisfied from the estate. The moneylenders of Limehouse have withdrawn into shadow. Scotland Yard watches. But that is another tale. He paused at the parapet, gazing across the river where gas lights reflected in broken gold on the black water. The innocent are relieved of suspicion, he said. The guilty bear their punishment. The dead, Victor Langford, rest honored in Highgate. His name cleared of the stain of embezzlement. Order, fragile as it is, has been restored. I felt a quiet satisfaction settle over me. The chase, the danger, the revelations, all had led to this moment of equilibrium. Holmes turned to me, eyes bright beneath the brim of his hat. Come, Watson. Mrs. Hudson promises a hot supper. Roast beef, I believe, and a bottle of the '74 claret. The fog has lifted. The night is clear. Let us walk home. We set off along the embankment, footsteps ringing on frosted stone. Behind us, Big Ben chimed the hour, its deep tone carrying across the water. Snow fell gently, muffling the great city. Yet the gas lamps burned steady and bright. The case was finished. Mysteries dissolved into facts. Facts into justice. Justice into the quiet resumption of daily life. At Baker Street the fire would be lit, the violin waiting, the index of cases one volume fuller, and London, vast and indifferent, turned once more toward its ordinary crimes and ordinary days. Chapter 10. Reflections by the Fire. Several weeks had passed since the Old Billy pronounced sentence. The new year of 1890 had come in with bitter frost. Snow lay thin and crisp along Baker Street, muffling the rumble of hansom cabs and the sharp clip of horses' hooves on cobbles. Inside 221B, the sitting room glowed with steady warmth. The coal fires snapped cheerfully in the grate, sending a pleasant scent of burning anthracite through the room. Holmes lounged in his favorite armchair, legs stretched toward the blaze, pipe in hand. The strong shag tobacco curled in lazy blue wreaths toward the ceiling. I sat opposite, notebook open on my knee, pen idle for the moment as I watched the flames dance. Mrs. Hudson had just cleared away the supper things. Roast pheasant, bread sauce, a bottle of the '74 claret now nearly empty. The lingering tastes of rich game and sweet brandy remained on the tongue. Outside, frost etched delicate ferns on the window panes. Inside, the heat wrapped us in comfortable contrast. The clock on the mantel chimed 9, its deep tone blending with the soft crackle of coals settling. Holmes broke the companionable silence first. The Langford case is closed neatly, Watson, he remarked, eyes half closed in contemplation. Reginald begins his term at Portland. Crow at Dartmoor. The diamonds rest once more in the firm's strong room. Perkins writes that trade resumes steadily. Mrs. Victor Langford has taken a small house in Hampstead. Her daughter attends a good school. The scandal fades. Society has already turned to fresher sensations. I nodded. A satisfactory conclusion. Yet I confess the locked room aspect still fascinates me. So many have attempted such devices. Yet yours was the mind that unraveled it. Holmes drew deeply on his pipe, the smooth bowl warm against his palm. Not mine alone, Watson. The material facts spoke plainly once observed without prejudice. The single arterial drop whose trajectory could only indicate a blow from behind while standing. The Latakia ash foreign to Victor's preference. The bowling on a bite. A knot no gentleman ties by habit. The fresh river mud on the inner sill when the door alone offered exit. Each detail impossible under the embezzlement theory. Eliminate the impossible, and what remains, however improbable, is murder staged as voluntary flight. He leaned forward, voice quickening with the old analytical fire. Observation versus guesswork. Watson, that is the heart of the matter. Lestrade guessed embezzlement because the safe stood open and the diamonds were gone. A convenient narrative, requiring no further exertion. I observed. The cigar, still warm yet ash of wrong blend. The rope bearing Stockholm tar sold days earlier to a scarred seaman. The grease on the window catch applied recently by hands not Victor's. Guesswork leaps. Observation plods patiently, collecting minutiae until pattern emerges. He rose and paced slowly before the hearth, dressing gown rustling, the coarse wool brushing chair arms. I recall the affair of the naval treaty. How a single sheet of paper, creased and smudged, revealed the thief's method of concealment in a dispatch box, or the speckled band, or a ventilator, a bell rope, and a saucer of milk formed an apparatus so ingenious that only material examination disclosed its deadly purpose. In each, the criminal's technique left its signature in the physical world. Langford's error was the same. He believed his contrivance flawless, yet no man contrives without imprinting himself upon the work. The nut was Crow's signature. The wrong tobacco ash, Langford's carelessness. The single drop of blood, gravity's impartial witness. Holmes stopped, steepling his fingers beneath his chin. The criminal mind is inventive, yet bound by habit and arrogance. Langford forged because forgery had served him before. Crow tied the bowline because it was the knot he knew best under pressure. Both assumed Scotland Yard would see only the surface, the open safe, the empty office, the missing stones. They underestimated trained observation, the lens that magnifies ash granules, the chemical test that matches mud to district, the logic that traces trajectory from droplet to wound. He resumed his seat, eyes bright in the firelight. Crime is the perversion of reason. Detection is reason restored to its proper office. When logic is applied without sentiment, without haste, without the distortion of preconception, the veil lifts, the impossible collapses. The improbable stands revealed as inevitable. In this case, as in so many, the supremacy of reason over deception was once again demonstrated. I set my notebook aside. You make it sound almost mechanical, Holmes. Yet there is art in it. The sudden leap when disparate facts align. The moment of illumination. He smiled faintly. Art, perhaps, in the execution. Science in the method. The artist guesses at beauty. The scientist measures and verifies. I prefer the latter. The fire burned lower now, coals glowing ruby red. Outside, a hansom cab passed, wheels hissing softly on the thin snow. The frost on the windows caught the gaslight from the street, sparkling like scattered diamonds. Holmes leaned back, pipe cooling in his hand. We have seen many such cases, Watson, each a small victory of order over chaos. Yet the work is never finished. Tomorrow another problem will knock at our door, another tangle of human frailty and ingenuity, and we shall begin again. Observe, collect, eliminate, deduce. I rose to stir the fire, adding a fresh lump of coal. Sparks flew upward. The new fuel caught with a cheerful crackle. The room smelled of warm tobacco, polished leather, hot coals, and the faint, clean scent of frost that drifted in whenever the door opened. Holmes watched the flames for a moment, then spoke softly, almost to himself. In the end, Watson, it is not the capture nor the sentence that matters most. It is the restoration of truth. When the material world is interrogated without mercy, when observation triumphs over assumption, reason prevails. And in that prevalence lies the only true justice we may claim in this imperfect world. He fell silent. I resumed my chair, content in the quiet companionship. The case was done. Its echoes faded into the ordinary hum of London life. The fire burned steady, the night outside cold and still. And at Baker Street, for a little while, all was peace.